Hi guys, welcome to another video. My name is Shivan Behel.
Okay, get out of the way. Okay, so let's do this properly. Hey guys, welcome back to another video. My name is Shivan, and in this video, as you can see, things are not the way they normally are. So let's address the elephant in the room. The 5'5" elephant in the room.
Hi guys, my name is Shresth. I am studying politics at King's College London and I'm from back India. Shivan and I live together and today we're going to be talking a bit more about the employment industry in the UK.
So essentially, Shresth is going to break down the big question of how to find a job in the UK. And we're going to get into all the details, bust all the myths and answer all your questions basically. But before we do that, I want you to go check out my YouTube channel, because I make videos on medical school and university. Videos about life in medical school, vlogs, day in the life videos, videos about how to get into medical school, and the same with university. So go check it out if you find it interesting. If you think it's something that you'd be into, then smash that subscribe button and join me for a lot more videos. So getting back to this video, let's not waste any time and let's get right into asking Shresth all the key questions about the job search in the UK. So Shresth, you told us a little bit about yourself, but just to get some clarity, can you introduce who you are, where you're from, what you're doing, all of that, so our audience gets a better understanding of you?
Sure. So, hi guys, my name is Shresth. I am studying politics at King's College London. I'm in my final year. I'm going to be graduating in July and I'm from India.
So now the big question, where do you currently stand in terms of finding a job in the UK?
Well, I mean, after an exhausting year-long process, I'm glad to say that I have landed a job at Bank of America.
That's amazing. So what exactly is the job?
So I'll be working as a graduate financial analyst at Bank of America, working on internal finance and strategy. My posting currently is in Cheshire, but I'm hoping to make it back to London in the next couple of years.
Okay, that's really cool. Congratulations.
Thank you.
That's an amazing job. It must have been a pretty grueling process to get there, I'm assuming.
100%. I mean,
Yeah.
you personally have seen me working on my applications, I think, more than anyone else. And I mean, it's safe to say that there's a fair amount of work that you have to do apart from just being very, very good at your education to crack a job in the UK, especially as an international student. But yeah, it was pretty grueling.
I can imagine, and I've witnessed the difficulties that you've had to face
Yeah.
along the way.
Yeah.
Okay, so now let's rewind a little bit, quite far back from when you got your job offer. So let's talk about when you were applying to university.
Yeah.
So what made you want to study politics?
A mistake. No, well, I mean it, a mistake, but I think it goes beyond that. I think in school I was a straight-A student in politics. It's something that I've studied quite often, and I think while you're in school you have a certain idea of what studying politics really means. But I mean, it turns out that the curriculum isn't at all what you think it might be as if you're a school student who has political science in their A-levels or their GCSEs, because I thought that I'd study politics to understand more about geopolitics, governments, etc., and the sort of things that we usually read in the news. But from my experience now, down 3 years later, I can tell with a lot of confidence that that really isn't the case. You end up talking a lot more about research designs, you end up talking a lot more about history, you end up just, it takes you to a different tangent. It's not about how much you know about contemporary geopolitics, but more about how much you understand about what's already happened, and understand not in the sense of, oh, why did this happen? It's more in the sense of, oh, how do theorists go about it? So it's not a very result-oriented subject, if I can put it that way.
So would you say the real-life applications of what you're learning are quite limited?
Yes, I definitely think so.
Taking that into mind, what advice would you give someone who's trying to currently choose a degree to pursue at university and they're not completely sure about it?
I mean, definitely, I think it's something that I probably should have done looking back at my time, but go through the modules very, very thoroughly, and probably if you have a LinkedIn account, talk to people who are already doing your course so that they can give you a better idea of the curriculum. Research the professors, because more often than not you can get a very good module but a professor who's probably not up to the task, or a very good professor in a module that really does not reflect what you want to learn. So I think definitely research the professors, talk to people who are doing the course, research the modules thoroughly, and don't limit your options to what you really like, but also try to, if you have a backup course, look at their modules as well. Don't take a backup course because the subject sounds nice, but also because if you have to end up studying it, you probably like what you're studying as well.
I mean, we've talked a little bit about the downsides, but would you say there were any advantages of your degree in terms of, your future career? Like, what are the things that you learned that are actually going to come into use?
I think that's a great question because it's about looking at the silver lining in situations that are not the most ideal. I think the politics degree, because it's such a research heavy course, especially when I think about employment in the UK, it's, for me at least, I think it's a numbers game. You have to be able to research a lot of companies. You have to understand their work. You have to understand their history to be able to face the interviewers. There's a whole lot that goes into finding a job to understand what you want to do in life in general. And I think the research-oriented nature of my degree really helped me develop that resilience that I can stick on the laptop for 12 hours looking at the same thing and maintaining a sense of concentration. So I think there's that definitely, and you gain a sense of worldliness. Sure, maybe my curriculum does not say much about what's happening in geopolitics, but it does give me a good lens to understand what's happening around me. Plus, you learn a lot about things like statistics, behavioral theories. So I think the applications of those, it might not be directly applicable in an employment scenario, but just in terms of understanding your surroundings, people around you, it really helps in understanding how people make decisions. So I think there are more peripheral benefits that come with it, like the associated skills within the course rather than the subject matter in itself.
Well, it's good to hear that your degree wasn't completely wasted.
Oh yeah, 100%.
Now, coming to the actual important part of this video, or the crux of this video, which is the job search. So, what jobs did you apply for?
So I primarily applied to consulting and the banking industry.
And what were your top choices in terms of jobs and why?
I think as any person is looking to get into the corporate industry will tell you, the MBBs were my main target. That is McKinsey, Bain and BCG. And apart on the banking side, the bulge bracket banks was what I was targeting.
Okay, and could you give some examples of those?
Sure. So the MBBs, like I said, McKinsey, Bain and BCG. For bulge bracket banks, you're looking at things like JP Morgan, Bank of America, Morgan Stanley and the works.
Okay. Tell us a bit about why you chose consulting and banking. What was it about those particular jobs that appealed to you?
So I think there are different reasons for both. I think when I think about consulting, I think it's a very diverse field. I know that you have a medical channel and a lot of your followers are med students, and I heavily encourage them to think about that as an industry as well, because more often than not, after studying 5 years of medicine, a lot of students can get more clarity about whether they want to pursue it or not, and at least through what angle. And I think consulting as a whole gives you a very diverse field to work in. So if you have a medical client, you can still use exactly what you learned but in a different manner as compared to general practice. So I think for me that was one of the main reasons, because it allowed me to work in a field that would keep changing every day. For banking, I think it was more of my safe option, because I felt that I have had the acumen to do that for a while, because I did some side courses. It's a subject that I've always been interested in. So for me that was the reason, but consulting in particular just because of its diversity.
Okay, that makes sense. And especially regarding consulting, I've got to know a lot more about that because of his job search. And it's definitely a great career for people in the medical field, medical students, to at least consider, because I think I personally feel like it's a little difficult, because many people get into university and get into a degree and realize that this is not exactly what they want to do. But in a degree like medicine, most people feel trapped that, I've put in this much work, this much money, this much effort into my degree. How can I not be a doctor? Even if you have second thoughts coming into your mind. But with something like consulting, you go into a career where you actually use your degree very well, but at the same time, you don't have to pursue the traditional sort of pathway. So it's definitely something that everyone should at least look into. Approximately how many places would you say you applied to?
So I would say 50 to 60 places easy. And I'm saying that because I genuinely do believe that it's a numbers game. The idea of applying to only the places that you really want and putting all your effort into it, it sounds quite nice, but I personally don't feel that it would have worked for me. Because my thought process is that I kept learning more about the job process as I kept applying to companies. Because I think once you are just thinking about what the best application should be, and you just apply to a selected number of companies, you don't have a frame of reference. For me, every single rejection told me something about the job application process. It made me figure out, okay, this isn't working, probably this is what I'm going to change. And definitely also the fact that in London especially, like if you're trying to get work apart from, like, let's say medicine, which is more of an understaffed field anyway because of the NHS, but in any other field, because it's so competitive, you can be the best applicant and still miss out even if your application is really good. So I think it's a matter of hedging your bets and just getting into as many places as you can.
I'm assuming that's something you would recommend for anybody in your position as well.
Definitely. And I mean, what I'd add to it is that the places you really want to get into, keep them for the last. And that adds a new dynamic to the entire process, that you have to start early, because you can't keep something for the last that you really want if you start on a normal timeline as every other student might. If you start early, even if you do the ones that you want the most at the last, you'll still be comfortable on the recruitment timeline, because I think by the end you are so ingrained into the process that you know the ins and outs of it. You know exactly what to avoid, exactly what to grasp, and that makes your final application, the one that you really want, the best, instead of doing it first without a frame of reference.
So now can you brief us a bit on what the application process looks like?
Right. So, I mean, if you're in the UK, like, I'm sorry to tell you, but the employment industry is extremely disorganized. So, more often than not, we don't have a lot, in London especially, we don't have placement services in our universities. At least King's doesn't have one. So it really comes down to you looking for the companies that you want to work for, figuring out their recruitment process, and then going about it just all on your own. Because the advice that you might get from career services in your university tends to be quite generic, and it does not, like, they don't update it as often as I think they should, because every company follows a slightly different path. Some of them have one assessment center, some of them might have 3 assessment centers, some of them don't care about a cover letter, the others care about a cover letter. So I think it's quite distinguished. But if I had to keep it put it in a linear timeline, I think you start off with your online application, which is step 1. Usually you have a CV, and I would suggest have a cover letter. Even if it's not mandatory, just have one, because the more you can tell the employer about yourself, the easier it is for them to progress you on to the next stages. The second stage, which brings me to that, is the numerical reasoning assessments. So it's essentially sort of like your SAT or GMAT type questions, bit numerical, bit of behavioral questions, some logical reasoning. I think it really helps them clear the applicant pool of people who may have made it through the CV round. But it's good for them. Like, I'm sure it might look unfair to some people given that, we are not very good at tests, but the employer can't take that chance on every applicant given that there are hundreds of thousands of applicants. So the second is that, and the third is usually an assessment center where you are put in groups with a lot of your co-competitors and you work together for them to see how you work in a team. And lastly, you might have an interview with a managing director or a partner or anything of the sort to get to that final stage.
Can you give us an idea of how competitive is it? Like, how competitive is it if someone wanted to understand really what you're up against?
Think of yourself as an ant, and think of the job application process as a very, 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 very tall building, because things are stacked up against you. One, you're a student, you're an entry-level professional. You don't have any credibility in the job market as of yet. There are hundreds and thousands of people from the most competitive universities in the world trying to get into London, specifically if you're trying to get into consulting or banking or even any other field, because the lifestyle of London is such that it attracts talents from all over the world, and you can never be too sure of overqualified people applying for positions of your stage. It happens very often, so you are competing with people who may have more experience than you. More often than not, employers also like to have master's students as their openers instead of undergraduates, because they tend to have studied more. So I think it's just a bunch of things, and especially if you're an international student and you require visa sponsored, I think it's incredibly difficult, because a lot of your applications will just be rejected on that front, because an employer has to take money out of their own pocket to sponsor your visa. And it's not just about the money, it's also about what sponsoring means. It's about taking responsibility of what you do in this country during your employment for that particular organization, and they don't want to go through that risk for multiplicity of reasons that I can honestly understand. I think it's fair on their part, but that just goes to show that if you're an international student, you are not just proving that you are just as good as all the other domestic applicants, but that you're better than them and you bring something to the table that other applicants cannot.
So now tell me a little bit about how you prepared yourself for your job application in the years before it. Essentially, how you strengthen your profile, your CV, the skills, everything to prepare you for both the job and all the different parts of the application.
Definitely. I think that's a very good question because the earlier you start, the better it is. Now, I'm going to also mention things that I did not do that I wished I had done. So, it does not matter if you're a medical student or you're a politics student or you're a business school student. If you have time in the first year, get a spring week for yourself so you get an idea of what the employment industry can look like apart from medicine or any other field that you have chosen into, because more often than not, things eventually work up to a corporate ladder or a workspace that involves a lot of people in a corporate setting. So I think get a spring week in your first year. The second year, try to get an internship, and the third year is your placement year. This is the most linear structure, but apart from that, I think it's extremely important that you add some transferable skills to yourself, be it presentation, be it man management, be it creative forces. I think for me, I personally was a part of a lot of the clubs in my school, the consulting club, the banking club, etc. And these gave me an opportunity to network with professionals in the industry. Now, these people aren't going to directly help you to get a job or anything, but they'll very well make sure that you know what you're getting into by telling you exactly the things to do, because every person's journey is different. So it'd be wrong of me to say that this is exactly what you're supposed to do, but for you to be able to customize your own journey, it's important that you take information about the industry from those who've gone through the process.
Okay.
I think it also sort of helps if you are on the lookout and if you know what's happening in the industry, because right now, like, we are in a phase where everything is getting more automated. Everything's moving towards AI. ChatGPT is suddenly a big thing, and these are developments that you need to be very, very aware of, because it renders your job, I won't call it useless, but it really changes how it's looked upon. So I think it's important to stay abreast of industry developments.
Okay, yeah. I think one thing that I've really seen with consulting and all the work you did around it and all of that is that you really have to be up to date on everything in the world and all, like you just said, all the different developments in the world, because you need to have an understanding of different industries, different markets, and really you need to know how the world works pretty well to, get a good grasp of it. Yeah. What would you say, for example, if you had to put it into actual different tasks a person can take up? Would you say work experience? Yes.
Definitely.
Yeah. Courses?
Definitely. Yeah.
Anything else?
Develop a crazy work ethic. I think the job process, every single rejection letter, it takes a toll on you, and I mean that emotionally. Getting that first rejection letter when you're trying to get a job, I think it's extremely painful to take that, and that happened again and again and again. Not because you're not qualified. Please don't take it that somehow you're not good enough for a job. More often than not, people get rejected without even having an in-person interaction with their employers, because they're trying to streamline the pool. So inevitably there are going to be some errors in measurement. So you really have to have a very thick skin before you start looking for a job. So I think that comes from just going about your business, not being afraid of failure, and sort of like picking yourself up again and again.
So now let's talk a little bit about tips for the different parts of the job application. So let's start with your CV. What are just a few quick tips that you may have to make a good CV?
I think the tagline to that should be make it pretty. I think there's no other way to say it. Think about this. An employer is going through 1 million applicants over a recruitment season. They have less than 30 seconds to decide whether the CV goes on to the next stage or not. So you have to make it very readable, very pretty, something that they want to really inquire about for them to actually go through the effort of reading it properly. So I think you need to make it pretty, and that sort of comes from making your sentences very concise, being very, very to the point about what you have done. Often you might feel that, oh, you know what, I've done maybe too much in life to consolidate it in one page. But I think that's where skills come in. As a consultant or a banking professional or even in a medical profession where you're supposed to explain medical concepts to patients in very layman terms, what you're required to do is prioritize the information that's in your head and put it in very, very concise terms so that you can give treatments on an urgent basis. In a similar fashion, like, I'm sure that probably a lot of you have done a lot in your life, but you need to be able to prioritize, okay, these are the things that matter for this particular job and these are the ones that I'm going to put out there. So don't feel bad about, oh, I'm missing out on certain work experiences in my CV. It's fine. It's really not that big of a deal. You have to be result oriented. You can't be like, I managed event organization in whatever club. It has to be, I manage X amount of events in this club leading to that. So it has to be a very result oriented process for them to be able to verify what you're talking about. It also helps if you can put in details of how you went about that process, because it adds extra credibility to how aware you are of the work that you're doing, because it's easy for us to mindlessly go about a certain job, but if we can give specifics of what the process look like, I think it makes the employer more comfortable in their skin about you as an applicant who knows what they're up to.
So essentially, I'd say what my takeaway from that would be is that presentation matters a lot. I guess the employer's first look at your CV is going to matter a lot, because it's going to attract them or put them off.
Yeah.
Okay, so next, the cover letter.
So, I mean, I think the cover letter, if you feel that there was something that you missed out on your CV because it has to be 1 page long, I think the cover letter is an excellent place for you to show out things that you thought were not important enough for the CV, but definitely add something to you or character as a prospective employee. I think it really is an opportunity for you to bring out yourself as a person instead of a piece of paper. And the employer is looking at a lot here. How you tell a story, how you present yourself. Because in any profession, regardless if it's consulting or medicine, life eventually becomes about telling that X led to Y, which is leading to Z, be it in terms of diagnosing a disease or why a company is failing. So I think how you tell a story really matters, and it shows in the cover letter. And I think there's something that I would say about the cover letter and the CV both together when I say that you have to make them pretty. Don't use an online customizer, because I've seen a lot of CVs in my day where people use customizers which has a picture and then bars of which say how good they are at a particular skill. Please don't do that. Stick to the traditional CV formats, because it's not easy. While a CV looks extremely simple on the face of it, when you look at one, it's very difficult to edit it, because you have to choose the right fonts, not in the sense of what looks beautiful, but what allows you to cram the most amount of information without it looking like ants on a piece of paper. So it's very, very difficult to edit a CV, and an employer wants to know that you could go through the effort of actually making one, because they understand how difficult it is to make a traditional CV. And online generators sense the message that you couldn't put enough effort into customizing your CV for that particular job, or you couldn't be asked to actually go through the process of making one altogether. So I think definitely don't use a customizer, stick to the traditional formats, because it still is the best in the market. I think the cover letter is also an opportunity for you to deviate from what about you is important, but more about what makes you a good fit for that particular company, which comes down to studying the company. Like my personal process used to be that if I want to work for a particular company, I would look at their projects in the past and use them as references that, oh, you guys did this with this particular client. I think my background in XYZ would have allowed me to add to that significantly, which shows that I've actually put in the effort to read the company, which also, while it seems easy on the face of it, but when you start looking at a company and understanding their work, it's actually a lot of hard work, because when you're applying for 50 companies and trying to understand 50 different businesses, it really takes a lot out of you.
And now the assessments.
I mean,
those were fun.
Yeah, they were. It's not that they are difficult, but it's more about the time pressure that you're under, which makes it easy for you to slip up. So I think the assessments, the numerical assessments, they're not difficult math. It's just a matter of it being phrased in a very tricky manner, which can catch out certain people. You also get some assessments where you have to write an email, a model email, and the idea is they're trying to understand how you communicate. Do you understand the right words that are to be used in a corporate setting? What matters is, can you prioritize what to tell to a particular stakeholder? They're checking all of that. They're checking if you can recognize who you're talking to. Do you know how to pick the right words? So that's part of the assessments as well. And now the assessment center. It's essentially what you do in the online assessments, but now in person. The difficulty levels are probably a bit more higher because you're expected to do it in a group, but I think you're expected to do similar things. They're trying to see how you work in a group. Can you conduct yourself in a corporate setting? And for some companies, the assessment centers might be 1 day long. For some companies, it might be 4 hours long. For some companies, it might be more than 1 day. My particular process was 4 hours long, and I had 4 hours worth of interviews back to back where they tried to test my technical competency, my behavioral competency, and my logical reasoning skills. So that's the assessment center, and I would definitely say that before you start applying for jobs, a good thing would be to check out resources like Victor Cheng or Case Fundamentals, because these really help you get in speed. Because while some maths calculations can be very simple, just to be in that habit of turning on that sort of skill of your that you have, it requires practice, and practice makes perfect. So definitely something to look into.
I love how you said they tried testing my skills.
Yeah, they tried.
He's just so good they can't test it. It's just they should take it as a given.
If I can add something to the process, I think it really helps if you have someone who's going through the process with you. I didn't have anyone, but I had this one who was willing to do the same questions that I was, and it really adds to your motivation to go about the process. So find a person who's going through the same journey, and it really makes it easy, because you sort of become a pillar of support for that person, and they can become the same for you.
Even the other people who I've seen going through their job applications, I think that's been something that's quite integral for them. And I mean, if you think about it intuitively, I mean, it just makes sense. If you're doing it with someone else, there's that synergy, and it'll just be better for both of you. The last set of tips, what can you tell us about preparing for interviews?
So I slept on this sofa throughout my application process. And the reason for that is it's the closest place to my desk in this house. And that sort of sums up your entire preparation for your interview, because from the second you start working on your job application, every single thing contributes to your interview. Every line that you write in your CV, every math question that you solve in an online assessment, every single group exercise you do in an assessment center, all of that culminates in an interview. And it is very important for you to be aware of the process that you're going through while you're going through it, because they're going to ask you, why did you put a certain thing on your CV? Why is it relevant? Could you elaborate on that? They might ask you some numerical questions without any notice. They are just trying to test how spontaneous you are, because clients might do that. Even patients, for example, like if you are a medical student, patients might ask you certain questions that are out of the thing that's being diagnosed in a particular setting, just because they feel it's important, and you have to suddenly switch over and talk about something completely different. So everything that you do, it's about that one interview. So just have a very strong work ethic. Try to be very aware of what you're doing. Don't be like, oh, I filled one application and the next I've forgotten what that application was all about just because I'm on to the next application. You need to keep in mind what you did in that last application, because more often than not, you might end up in an interview where something that you did for another job application might suddenly become relevant. So definitely that's something that I would say. And to put it in a nutshell, I think being aware of yourself is the key. Is absolutely important, because if you're not aware of yourself, it's going to be very hard to tackle some questions where they expect you to think on your feet, because these companies are aware of the regular questions that are asked and they try to steer away from them as well, quite actively, at least now.
I think that really sums it up. And I mean, I personally have not gone through such job interviews, but one thing that I found really useful when preparing for my medical school interviews was just practicing speaking, not focusing as much on content and writing down answers throughout, but more on answering questions out loud, because I don't think you can ever predict exactly what someone is going to ask you in an interview. So just being prepared to answer questions you may have never heard on the spot is sort of an essential tool for any interview. And maybe just having a bank of information or your experiences that you can draw from to answer those questions might be useful as well.
Now, I think Shivan makes a wonderful point. Practice speaking, and when I say that, stand in front of a mirror and practice all the answers that you are very sure of. And I promise you're going to look like an ass for the first 10 times. But I think it's a process. The more you are comfortable with your own space, the more aware you are of how you talk, because we all have our certain ways of talking where we might look a bit ridiculous, or we might not look as presentable while talking about a certain thing, because we are not aware of our space, how we express ourselves, what are our expressions on the face. And you ideally want to smile on your face at all times when you're in an interview, but the more you practice in front of a mirror or in front of a friend for that matter, you can get a better idea of how your body reacts to certain questions. When you're anxious, if you get caught off guard, how does your body react? And if you can be aware of that, it really helps to keep the nerves still when that actual interview is there.
What would you say the challenges are on a more personal level, like staying motivated or dealing with the inevitable rejections that come? How do you sort of, power through all of that?
Like I mentioned, start early, develop a crazy work ethic, have a thick skin. And I know it's easier said than done, but the earlier you start, the more likely you are to face those rejections early on, which might help you develop that thick skin. Because after my first rejection letter, I felt like just letting go, because what's the point? But it's very, very important to push through that barrier, and it really comes from like getting your failures early on. And for me, like I like to say, put it this way, I wish my biggest failures come to me earlier in life so that I have enough time to recoup from them. So definitely, I think start very, very early when you do that, and probably have some friends that you can talk to about that process, because it's very hard to keep that rejection within yourself. If you don't have anyone to express that to, it becomes very hard, because you probably end up containing some frustration which you might want to channel in a positive way, but some of it ends up leaking out in a negative manner, which might affect your future applications.
And now the last question, to sum everything up, if you had to sort of compress everything into one sentence or one or two sentences for a future job applicant, a set of advice, a very small, brief set of advice, what would you say to them?
Just one thing, start understanding yourself and do it early.
Okay, so I think that was a lot. I'm sure this is going to be one of my longer videos, but I think it was very, very informative, and it was packed with all sorts of great advice and expertise on the job application process from Shresth here. I hope you find it helpful, and I hope it sort of helps you get an insight into the job application process and how you can start, the things you can do, the challenges you'll face, and how you should prepare yourself to deal with them. And if it helped you in all of that, and if you found it useful, then he was nice. Drop a like on this video, smash that subscribe button, leave any comments you want down below, saying anything or asking me any questions you like. I will relay them to him and get back to you with an answer.
If he gets an answer.
Right. Depends on this man's mood. Yeah, just share the video with any of your friends who are looking for a job in the UK or are thinking about applying. With that, I will see you in the next video. He
probably will. You might
maybe
feature my voice.
Probably. Yeah.
Alright. Bye guys.
See you.
Get out.